The Château Lumière was the kind of restaurant where reservations had 6-month waiting lists and dinner for two cost more than most people's mortgage payments. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over mahogany tables, each one perfectly set with bone china and silverware that probably cost more than my monthly rent. At least that's what my family thought. Tonight marked Mom and Dad's 30th wedding anniversary, and they'd chosen their favorite upscale restaurant to celebrate with the extended family. 12 of us sat around the large corner table, the one reserved for their most important guests. Everyone was dressed to impress. Mom in her signature Valentino dress, Dad in his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, my sister Rebecca sparkled in diamonds that could fund a small country. Then there was me sitting quietly in my simple black dress from Target, the same one I'd worn to 3 family events this year. Not because I couldn't afford better, but because I'd learned long ago that my family needed someone to look down on, and I was happy to play that role. Sarah, darling, Mom's voice rang across the table as the appetizer course arrived. How's your little shop doing? The entire table turned their attention to me. Uncle Philip adjusted his glasses with barely concealed amusement. Aunt Catherine leaned forward like she was about to watch her favorite reality show. Rebecca smirked behind her wine glass, already knowing where this conversation would lead. It's going well, I said simply, cutting into my seared foie gras. The same foie gras that cost $85 per plate, though they didn't know I knew that. A flower shop, Dad chuckled, shaking his head. 32 years old, Harvard MBA, and she's arranging bouquets for grocery stores. It's actually wedding and event florals, I corrected gently. Same thing, Rebecca interjected. Small business, small dreams, small life. At least someone at this table is living within their means, right, Sarah? The table erupted in polite laughter. These people loved their little jokes at my expense. Speaking of living within means, Mom continued, her voice taking on that particular tone she used when she was about to deliver what she thought was a devastating observation. Look around this restaurant, Sarah. Really look at it. I glanced around obediently. The hand-painted frescoes on the ceiling, the imported Italian marble floors, the wine cellar visible through glass walls that held bottles worth more than most cars. I'd studied every detail of this place extensively over the past 6 months. This is what success looks like, she continued. The owner of this restaurant, Jean-Claude Bernard, is a real entrepreneur. He built an empire. Multiple locations, a cookbook deal, a television show. That's the kind of vision and ambition that creates generational wealth. The kind of vision you'll never have, Dad added, raising his glass. Some people are just born failures, Sarah. There's no shame in accepting your limitations. Uncle Philip nodded sagely. It's actually admirable in a way. Not everyone can be a winner. Society needs people to work the small jobs, run the little shops. Someone has to arrange flowers for other people's success stories. I took another bite of the foie gras and nodded. You're absolutely right. This restaurant is incredible. See. Mom gestured around the table. She agrees. You'll never own anything like this restaurant, Sarah. Places like Château Lumière represent a level of sophistication and business acumen that's simply beyond some people's reach. The average person, Rebecca added, has no idea what it takes to run a high-end establishment like this. The connections, the capital requirements, the sheer complexity of the operation. It's not like arranging flowers for wedding receptions. The conversation continued along these familiar lines as the main course arrived. Wagyu beef that melted on the tongue, lobster flown in fresh from Maine that morning, wines selected from the restaurant's legendary cellar. Each dish was a masterpiece, which made sense considering I'd personally approved every menu item over the past year. The wine selection alone, Aunt Catherine was saying, probably costs more than Sarah's entire annual inventory. Speaking of wine, Dad said, examining his glass of 1998 Bordeaux, this bottle probably costs $400. That's more than most people spend on groceries in a month. It's actually $600, I said quietly. Everyone stopped talking and stared at me. I'm sorry. Mom's voice was sharp. The wine. It's $600 per bottle. The 1998 Chateau Margaux. It's one of their premium selections. Dad frowned. How would you possibly know that? I noticed it on the wine list, I said with a shrug. I like to see what things cost. Probably gives her anxiety attacks, Rebecca whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. seeing what successful people can afford. The laughter that followed was more uncomfortable than amused. Something about my knowledge of the wine prices had shifted the mood slightly, though I couldn't tell if anyone else had noticed. "Well," Mom said, recovering quickly, "at least you're realistic about your place in the world. That's more than most people your age can say." My phone buzzed quietly with a text from my property manager. "Final walkthrough complete. All documents ready for signing as planned." I typed back discreetly, "Perfect. Have James bring them at 8:30 exactly. Are you texting during our anniversary dinner?" Dad's voice carried disapproval and amusement in equal measure. "Just confirming tomorrow's flower delivery," I lied smoothly. "See what I mean?" he said to the table. "Small business, small problems. While we're enjoying a sophisticated evening out, she's worried about tulips and carnations." "Actually," Uncle Philip said, warming to the theme, "I think it's important that Sarah understands the difference between her world and ours. Places like this represent serious money, serious business, serious success. The kind of establishment that requires millions in startup capital and decades of experience in fine dining." "Exactly," Mom agreed. "The owner, Jean-Claude, is a real visionary. He started with nothing and built this empire through pure talent and determination. That's what separates people like him from people like—" She gestured vaguely in my direction. "People like me," I finished helpfully. "Well, yes. There's nothing wrong with knowing your limitations, darling. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur." I checked my watch. 8:28 p.m. Almost time. "The real difference," Rebecca was saying, "is scale of thinking. Sarah thinks about individual wedding bouquets. Jean-Claude thinks about hospitality empires, brand expansion, market positioning. It's just a completely different level of business sophistication. The real estate alone," Dad added, "this building is probably worth $15 million. Prime downtown location, historical significance, fully renovated to 5-star standards. That's the kind of investment that requires serious capital and serious vision." "Actually," I said, taking a sip of the expensive wine, "it's worth $18.2 million. The historical designation adds about 20% to the base value." Another uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "How could you possibly know that?" Aunt Catherine asked, her voice suspicious. Before I could answer, our waiter appeared beside the table. James had worked at Château Lumière for 8 years, and I'd specifically requested him for tonight's service. "Excuse me," he said politely, "Ms. Williams?" Every head at the table swiveled toward me. "Yes," I said as if I had no idea what was coming. "The ownership papers you requested." He placed a thick manila folder beside my plate. "Everything's been notarized and filed with the city as of 6 p.m. today. Congratulations on your purchase." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the kitchen staff preparing dishes 2 rooms away. Mom's fork was frozen halfway to her mouth. Dad's wine glass tilted dangerously in his suddenly unsteady hand. Rebecca's face had gone completely pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. "Purchase." Mom's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. I opened the folder and glanced through the documents, even though I'd reviewed them dozens of times over the past month. Property deed, business license transfers, liquidity agreements, staff contracts. Everything looks correct. "Sarah," Dad said slowly, "what exactly are those papers?" "The ownership documents for Château Lumière," I said, closing the folder. "I bought it 6 weeks ago. The transaction finally closed this afternoon." Uncle Philip made a sound like he was choking on his own saliva. You bought this restaurant? The building, the business, the brand, the wine cellar, everything. It's all mine now." Rebecca found her voice first, though it came out about 2 octaves higher than usual. "That's impossible. You run a flower shop. You can't afford a place like this." "Well," I said, taking another bite of the Wagyu beef, "it turns out the flower business is more profitable than most people realize." "How much?" Dad's question came out like a croak. $18.2 million for the real estate, another $4 million for the business assets and inventory. $22.2 million total. Mom's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor, sending Bordeaux splashing across her Valentino dress. $22 million? Aunt Catherine whispered. "For a flower shop owner?" I smiled and signaled James, who immediately appeared with a cloth to clean up the spilled wine. The flower business was just the beginning. Williams Hospitality Group now owns 17 restaurants across 5 cities, 2 hotels, a catering company and an events planning firm. Château Lumière is actually our smallest property. The table sat in stunned silence as James efficiently cleaned up the wine and replaced Mom's glass. Around us, other diners were starting to notice our table's sudden quiet intensity. 17 restaurants? Rebecca's voice was barely audible. 19 as of next week. We're acquiring 2 properties in Miami. Dad cleared his throat, his business instincts finally kicking in despite the shock. Sarah, this is incredible news. We had no idea you were involved in anything this substantial. You never asked, I said simply. Every time I tried to talk about work, someone made a joke about flower arrangements. So I stopped talking about work. But the flower shop Mom started is real. It's also my smallest business. I started there because I wanted to understand hospitality from the ground up. Wedding florals led to event planning, which led to venue management, which led to restaurant acquisition. Each business taught me something new about the industry. Uncle Philip leaned forward, his earlier condescension replaced by something that looked like panic. Sarah, when you say Williams Hospitality Group owns 17 restaurants, 18 now with Château Lumière. What about Jean-Claude Bernard, the owner you were all talking about? I glanced around the table at their expectant faces. Jean-Claude was ready to retire. His children weren't interested in the restaurant business. When Williams Hospitality made an offer, he was actually relieved to find a buyer who understood his vision for the brand. So you're... Dad swallowed hard. You're his replacement? I'm the new owner, yes. Jean-Claude is staying on as executive chef and brand consultant, but Williams Hospitality Group owns and operates the restaurant now. Rebecca's jewelry caught the light as her hands trembled slightly. Sarah, what's Williams Hospitality Group worth? The current portfolio is valued at around $340 million. We're projecting $500 million by the end of next year with the Miami expansion and 2 new properties we're looking at in Chicago. The number hung in the air like smoke from an expensive cigar. $340 million, Mom repeated slowly, as if testing whether the words made sense when she said them out loud. Give or take. The valuations fluctuate with the market. James reappeared at my elbow. Ms. Williams, Chef Bernard wanted me to tell you that the special dessert course is ready whenever you'd like it served. Special dessert course? I looked around the confused faces at the table. Oh, I had them prepare something special for the anniversary celebration. I hope that's okay. You had them, but you just bought. Dad seemed to be having trouble forming complete sentences. I've been planning this evening for weeks. I wanted Mom and Dad's anniversary dinner to be perfect. The dessert course arrived with obvious ceremony, our elaborate chocolate sculpture surrounded by edible flowers and accompanied by champagne that I knew cost $200 per bottle. The presentation was museum quality, the kind of thing that gets photographed for food magazines. The flowers are from my shop, I mentioned casually as everyone stared at their plates. I thought it would be a nice touch. Mom looked up from her dessert with tears in her eyes. Not happy tears, something more complicated. Sarah, why didn't you tell us? All this time we thought, we treated you like a failure? I finished gently. I know. You made that very clear at every family gathering for the past 5 years. But we didn't know, Rebecca protested. If we'd known you were successful, you would have treated me differently, I agreed. That's exactly why I didn't tell you. Uncle Philip frowned. I don't understand. I wanted to know who you really were, I explained. When you thought I was just a flower shop owner struggling to make ends meet, you showed me exactly how you treat people you think are beneath you. Every condescending comment, every dismissive joke, every time you ignored me at family gatherings, that was the real you. The table fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of quiet. Not shocked silence, but the uncomfortable quiet that comes when people realize they've been caught being their worst selves. Success doesn't change who people are, I continued. It just reveals who they were all along. You're the same people who spent years making me feel small and worthless. The only difference is now you know I was never small or worthless to begin with. Dad cleared his throat. Sarah, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We were trying to motivate you, to encourage you to reach for more. By calling me a born failure? By saying I'd never amount to anything? By laughing about my limitations? Mom reached across the table toward my hand. Darling, we love you. We're family. We should celebrate this amazing success together. I pulled my hand back gently. 5 minutes ago, you were explaining why I'd never be capable of owning a place like this. You were using this restaurant as an example of everything I could never achieve. But now we know better, Aunt Catherine said desperately. Now we can have a real relationship based on mutual respect. Mutual respect, I repeated thoughtfully. Where was that respect when you thought I was poor? James appeared again, this time with the check presented in a leather folder. He placed it discreetly beside Dad's plate. Oh, that won't be necessary, I told James. The meal is complimentary, obviously. Owner's privilege. Dad opened the folder anyway, and his eyes widened when he saw the total. $1,200, he whispered. For 12 people, that's actually quite reasonable for a restaurant of this caliber, I said. Though I suppose it doesn't matter now since it's my restaurant. I stood up from the table and picked up my Target purse, the same purse they'd been making fun of earlier in the evening. Thank you all for coming to celebrate Mom and Dad's anniversary, I said. The dinner was lovely. James, please make sure everyone gets home safely. Sarah, wait, Mom called as I turned to leave. We need to talk about this. As a family. I paused and looked back at the table full of stunned faces. We did talk about it. For 5 years. You made your feelings about me very clear and I made notes. But things are different now, Rebecca insisted. You're right, I agreed. Now I know exactly who I'm dealing with. As I walked toward the exit, I could hear the explosion of whispered conversation behind me. Desperate attempts to process what had just happened, probably mixed with calculations about how this changed their relationships with me. My phone rang as I reached my car, the same 10-year-old Honda that had gotten me through business school and the early days of building my empire. Sarah. How did it go? My business partner Marcus's voice filled the car as I answered on Bluetooth. Exactly as expected, I said, starting the engine. They showed me who they really are when they think it doesn't matter. And now I know. The Miami properties are going to be perfect for what we discussed. Family money and family loyalty aren't the same thing. Speaking of family, Marcus said, your cousin Jennifer called the office today. Apparently she heard about the acquisition through some industry contacts. She wants to discuss family investment opportunities. I laughed as I pulled out of the restaurant's parking lot. Jennifer hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. Let me guess, she's suddenly very interested in my little flower business. That's the one. Should I take a message? Tell her I'm arranging bouquets for grocery stores. She'll understand. Tomorrow, when the local business journal ran their story about the Château Lumière acquisition, when my family's friends started asking questions about their unsuccessful daughter, when the invitations to family events started including phrases like, we'd love to hear about your business, things would be different. Not because I'd finally proven myself worthy of their respect, but because they'd finally proven themselves unworthy of mine. Williams' hospitality group had bigger plans and better opportunities ahead. And for the first time in 5 years, I wouldn't have to explain any of it to people who had already decided I wasn't worth listening to.